Oh. Well, this was certainly a surprise. So a few of you like my idea of trying to level a character in Classic World of Warcraft using AI, and I thought it was an interesting idea too. Some people though had some suggestions.
You're boring. You don't sound Nigerian at all.
But seriously though, I'm blown away by the reaction I got from this idea, including Asmon's, which I thought was in the realm of fantasy, but here we are. If you haven't seen the first part of this series, check it out first before watching this. I've read pretty much every comment left on mine and Asmon's video, looking for suggestions and tweaks that I can apply to this idea, and I'm very thankful for everyone that did. Obviously the biggest suggestion I totally agree with was more use of the AI, and that's what I've done. I asked it to make me some useful macros for leveling my warrior. They weren't very good. I asked it to suggest some add-ons for me. These may not be necessary. I got it to code me an entirely custom add-on to shout at me whenever I didn't have battle shout enabled. I even asked it for the best way to make money. Ooh, fishing sounds nice. I even downloaded the AI voiceover add-on just to give everything another layer of AI-driven adventure.
All members of the Horde are equal in my eyes, adventurer!
But the two main items I wanted to work on was the talents and the leveling guide. Now, we'll come to the talents in a moment, but first let's look at the guide. The biggest complaint I saw was that the guide was essentially useless. It was too vague, didn't offer anything of value to the leveling experience, and could be a lot better. And I agree. After I made that first video, I spent the best part of a week tweaking and making guide after guide after guide, working with people in my Discord.
Your guide is shit, mate.
Until eventually, I created this. Now, let me make this clear. This guide is still far from perfect, but out of all the generations and variations and me just wanting to play the game again, I would say this guide is closest I'm going to get to what looks like a leveling guide. I'm sure some of you AI prompt experts could probably do better, but I'd like to state for the record, I'm not professional in any kind. You might also notice that the guide no longer just points us to Ashenvale and it's more all over the place now, but supposedly the AI has given us a time-efficient method. Now, before we jump into the game, one final point I want to state is that while making variations on these guides, I did start and complete maybe a quest or two in Ashenvale before realising one of the earlier generated guides didn't work. So it may seem a little jumpy at the start, but it will all make sense. Right, on with the leveling. So as I said, I did start leveling in Ashenvale following on from my first attempt at making a new guide, and man, that was difficult. These mobs hit harder than ever, and it was a real struggle. Not only that, but as I read ahead, I noticed that some of the quests were just not available to me or in totally different locations. So I spent an extraordinary amount of time making guides over and over and over again to get one that made the most sense. Eventually, I landed on this guide. This is the guide I'll be following for levels 20 to 30. It has a quest by quest layout, it recommends me where to set my Hearthstone, and it also tells me when I should train new skills. Again, not perfect, which we will get into in just a moment, but it's a far cry better than the previous one, which was just go here and quest. Now, the first thing you may notice in this guide is that we're no longer heading to Ashenvale straight away. This guide actually sends us to Stone Talon Mountains first, which is actually a way better suggestion already. It gives us 4 quests to do here: Cycle of Rebirth, Goblin Invaders, Blood Feeders, and Earthen Arise. These quests were a lot closer to my current level, so it was actually kind of quick just to blitz through them and get them done. One thing I did notice though with this guide is that it has the right quest title, but the description doesn't actually fit what I'm doing in the game. I have a feeling it's reading quest text from a later expansion or something like that, but either way, the quests still exist in Classic, so I'd say that's fine. Once I handed in all the quests that were recommended, I noticed that I wasn't quite onto the next level as I should be. So I continued reading and it had a suggestion to hit 22. Oh man, I don't want to be back here. Yes, the guide recommends we run Wailing Caverns one more time so that we can hit 22 and continue on. Once I got a group together, we head in, and let me tell you, this druid tank I picked up seems to pull mobs like it's retail. Sometimes he's not even thinking about the healer's mana. We ran through the caverns quite quick because of this, and I'm actually surprised we didn't wipe at all. Once we get to the big boss, clear him pretty quick, but the dungeon then takes an interesting turn. We all jump down at the back of the room to start heading on to the next half of the dungeon, and our tank is somehow lost on how to get to us. I've never had this before, but we tried to explain which way to go to jump down, but he just rage quits and leaves the group. So it's up to me and our hunter to double tank the rest of the dungeon, which I was actually able to do quite easily. We made it through to the end with no problems. I even helped 2 of the group to get their deviate hides because I know how much of a pain that is. And hey, it's all XP. Now that I'm 22, I head back over to Stone Talon Mountains to wrap up 2 quests. These quests took me way too long. There were a lot of mobs in this area and some of them hit hard. I wouldn't have been able to do it in the time that I did without another orc warrior turning up and needing the same quests. Also, another shout out to a terrible graveyard spawn, this time for Stone Talon. This grave run takes 5 minutes to get back to my body when you're doing these quests. We hand in these quests and we can finally move on to Ashenvale. So this part of the guide recommends another 3 quests for me to complete and reach level 25. I know what you're thinking, there's no way 3 quests can get me up 2 levels. I asked the AI to recommend me some additional quests to take on, and it sends me to the other side of Ashenvale to complete quests like the Naga at the Sorum Strand and between a rock and a thistlefur. Now these are more like it, easy to get done, and one of them leads onto the same area for troll charms. I also found someone doing the same quest as me, so it just made sense to group up and get it done quicker without the constant dying. We speed through these quests and I'm so close to hitting 24, so maybe I'll try the Satyr Horns quest. I made a mistake. So I check back with the guide and notice it also recommends me some other options instead of quests to help me level up, one of which is grinding mobs in the area. And seeing as I'm so close to hitting 24, I'll just go on a bit of a rampage. Grinding mobs goes a lot quicker when you're listening to the Doom soundtrack. I finally hit 24, and as per the guide, I head back to Orgrimmar to learn my new abilities. Once I'm back, I realise I don't really have any quests left to go with, other than the cursed Satyr Horns one, that I'm still under-leveled for. So following on from my last rampage of the local wildlife, I decide to just hit 25 through the South Park method. 187 furbolgs later, I'm 25. Now that I'm 25, the guide gives me 3 more quest recommendations, or the suggestion of running Blackfathom Deeps, and I'd much prefer running dungeons. Not only for the quests and the gear, but also I think I'd just prefer it in some ways. It asks us to pick up all available quests for the dungeon, and then I form a group. I did realise halfway towards the entrance that one of the quests needed me to loot the crystals on the walls, so I didn't get them all before entering the dungeon. Once we're in though, it's quite a simple run. I think by this point most people are confident in their class and role, so the dungeon experience gets a lot more bearable compared to Wailing Caverns. Not much happened in this dungeon, other than my stupidness revealing itself when I forgot that breath was a mechanic. Oh, and we did mess up on these mobs here because someone lit all the braziers at once, spawning the ads. But other than that, it was an easy run, and after handing in my quests, it got me a good chunk of XP. Now I just got into a flow of running the dungeon over and over again just because it was quick, and actually had some decent loot, including this sweet sword. But in the end, I think I ran this dungeon like 4 or 5 times, getting to level 27. At that point, I again just had such a small amount of XP, I just murdered more wildlife. Now that I'm 28, I once again head into Orgrimmar, learn my skills, then head across to Thousand Needles. While I'm travelling there, let me discuss the new talent system I'm working with, as suggested by a member of my guild, Ignite. Instead of asking it for a build, I'm going to ask it at every level for its recommendation, focusing on arms first, then Fury once I've invested 30 points or so into arms. And to be fair, it's worked quite well. It never really wants to give me a definitive answer, but it usually narrows it down to just 2 choices. But yeah, I'd say it's a much more interesting way to build a talent tree, and so far it's been working quite well. Anyway, once I'm in Thousand Needles, I find the glitchiest elevators in the world. Seriously, what's going on with these things? They actually end up getting me killed, so that's a good start to this portion of leveling. Now the guide has provided me a nice chunk of recommended quests to follow, and while doing them I have come to a conclusion. Leveling in Thousand Needles sucks. Seriously, just getting around this zone is a nightmare. All the mobs have an aggro range of half a mile, they're all really annoying mobs too, like hyenas, elementals and lions, and everything has a stun, so you spend almost all your time moving around this zone drunk after being concussed. In terms of quests though, they're alright. It's mostly just killing stuff to get some drops, like the Grim Totem spying quest, but holy hell, the new ore sample quest also sucks. Why does this mob only spawn in 5 locations and they're all so spread apart across this zone? Sometimes classic quest design just infuriates me. After completing most of these quests, the next segment of the guide suggests running Razorfen Crawl. So once again, I round up a group and we head inside. Now I've got to say again, once you start dungeoning at these later levels, most people you find are quite competent at what they're meant to be doing. Sure, some people might slip up here and there, but I've got to say, the experience just gets so much easier at these levels. Also, finding people for these dungeons is a lot quicker somehow. You can get a group together so fast. I only needed to run this twice for some of the loot, including this sweet helmet that I now have. And just before we finish the second run, I hit level 30. So, let's talk AI again. For this segment of leveling, after some tweaking, it's become a lot better, and in terms of suggestions for doing certain quests, setting my Hearthstone, and when to train my abilities, it's actually been pretty good. It has missed the mark with some of the quests though. I'm looking at you, Satyr Horns. But overall, I'd say after working on my prompts and further questioning, it's come up with quite a nice layout. So my plans for the next set of levels is this. I'm going to take this format of the prompt and layout, and I'm going to get it to generate me a guide for every 10 levels. So now it'll be a fresh guide for 30 to 40, then 40 to 50, then finally 50 to 60. I think this should get me through the next set of levels in no time. If you do have any suggestions of things for me to try and to add to it, then put it in the comments below and I'll try and make it happen. Lastly, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to everyone who has watched my first video on this idea, and also a huge shout out to Asmongold and his community for the support they've given me. Genuinely, I thought I was such a small time channel, there's no way anything like this could have happened. I'd also like to say thank you to my guild who recruited me shortly after my first video came out. You guys had some great feedback and suggestions for me. And finally, thanks to all the random people sending my character mail in game, or whispering me and trading me stuff in Orgrimmar, and saying how much you like the video. It's genuinely bonkers. I've never experienced anything quite like this. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Bye for now.